Good. Okay. We are live on the interwebs. And as soon as Jessica's ready. I will call to order this special meeting of the Village of Trustees Board of Trustees. February 22nd, 2023. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Our first public comment period. I see no members of the public in person. We have David from the Free Press via Zoom. David, if you have any questions, just let me know, and we will move right along to item number 4, which is new business. In the there we go. Drop box, we have an MOU, a draft MOU between the village and the school. This will be presented at the school board's March meeting. And I figured we'll just approve it tonight. Superintendent Bell indicated that whenever the South Street and Wig Street crossing guard starts, the school would backdate their MOU to cover that. It won't just start after their March meeting. And so the MOU says that it's an agreement between TCSD and the village. And I won't read the whole thing. Essentially, it says that the village is going to provide a crossing guard at the intersection of South and Wig as staffing allows. And the school district is agreeing to reimburse the village for half of the actual payroll related costs incurred by the village for the provision of that guard, of that crossing guard. And the village will bill TCSD for those costs. And so I would entertain a motion to authorize my signing this MOU with the school as soon as they adopt the same. So, second. Questions, comments, edits? Hearing none and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Which takes us to item number 5, which is our budget working session number, who knows how many at this point. So we had a couple of, we went through the general fund budget last go around. We had a few items outstanding. One of which was, I highlighted in yellow and mine's green. What did we decide we wanted to do with the engineer to contract with an RV?
I get an email back from, I was trying to come up with something that was more in the 12.5 range. And I know that Matt just emailed me back and I didn't get to actual review. I think we can go with that approach. I'm not saying anything. Let me
Got it.
read this as we go, but I think 12.5 will be the number that we can go for. That gets us doing the field investigation in the coming budget year, and then we can continue conversations with the village, or that's our town about further work beyond that.
Okay,
12.5.
12.5, yeah.
That's the one that was 19, right?
Right, so we had initially had it combined with one other piece of work. But I believe, and I'll double check now, that separating those wasn't a problem. We could keep going.
okay. Next one I had highlighted was 3120.4 police contractual. Vicki, let's make that 15, same as last year. Did talk to Joe about that today. Remind me, Ben Barber or Vicki, 4540.414, the ambulance contingency for 8,800.
That was actually one I had flagged. I don't know what that comes from.
That was something, Ben, that you had asked me to add shortly after our meetings with, the towns, and hold on, I just need to pull up what I had put in my, at that. meeting.
Is it related to the equipment? Was that the?
No, not, it has something to do with personnel and bond. Is that the 8,800 is? Hold on.
Well,
Available to each employee for discretionary employment related
oh, yeah,
purchases, training, additional uniforms or shoes, that's what it was.
that was the original idea. That has been completely displaced. So that can zero.
That's what I like to hear.
There was, so while we're on EMS though, there was, I brought this up with the towns and then forgot to tell Vicky in advance of this meeting, but we talked last time about zeroing the capital reserve. But the equipment. We had talked about, remember I mentioned that our equipment plans, we don't really have a replacement plan for the audit pulse and all of those things. So I think this would be, we didn't do this with the towns, but since we've zeroed out that capital reserve, I think it would be a good time to boost that EMS equipment line, because we can get there soon. We are. We'll be, and I talked about this with the towns, but basically we'll be playing catch up to get back to where we should be. So if we could start that now, it would give us a leg up then, and since we're cutting out the capital reserve, seems like a good. So I would say we either go at least to 10, maybe 15. On that line.
So I had a discussion with Joel today. He wants me to do a permissive referendum in March for $10,000 for a ventilator.
Yeah,
Okay, and he wants it to come out of this equipment line.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's not super risky, but so the question is 10 or 15.
So we're bumping that then?
Yeah. I would say 15 would be ideal. But
We should probably do
but we
10
can do
this year,
10, so
15 next year.
Yeah, that works.
So we're just bumping it to 10 or an additional 10?
2, 10. Okay.
Sorry, I jumped around. That's okay.
Let's see. $5142.2, that's a snow removal equipment. That's got both of the plows in there, right?
No,
16,000.
yes, 51, yeah, 41, yes, both ones.
Any thought to doing one this year and one next?
Don't know off the top of my head. I could chat with Dusty if he's available. I can just text him. I don't know what the date of the files are, so that would be the only thought. I know you'd asked last time about doing this out of the line versus reserves. I'm still kind of agnostic either way, but my impression is that they're buying these plows to then live over multiple trucks.
I don't mind doing it out of the line. I'm just wondering about.
I can give him a text and see if he's.
DP's bit around, we do one this year and one next. And then did we decide for sure on the sidewalk contractual, a couple lines?
So, yeah, I talked with Dusty today and asked him to get me like a rough quote. I'm thinking in the past, I think we put about 10K in there for a stretch of road or sidewalk. I'd suggest putting that as a placeholder. We can get a finer number on that, but this is primarily for Union Street. We do have kind of a friendly agreement with TCFA to do that road, that stretch as part of like in helping with the.
But we didn't use the 20 that we allocated for the budget year we're in.
True, but that didn't go to reserves, did it?
No.
We had a contract sidewalk.
Right, we didn't get around, we weren't able to do any work this year because of short staffing.
So do you think we'll use Do you think we'll get to any Union Street sidewalk in the current budget year to use the 20 that we haven't touched yet?
I didn't ask that, Lori. I can also ask that. I don't know.
The other thing we could do is if we order the supplies in this current budget year, we can encumber that money into the next budget year. But the supplies have to
Yeah.
be ordered before.
Supplies are things like concrete though, like, I mean, it might be possible to buy that in advance and say, bring it in 2 months, but
Just say we'll deliver it when we
Yeah.
call you.
It actually might work, because it might be free, like it might be forms. That's a tough spot.
it could be new forms. I think we've mostly built our own forms, but
Now, but it's gonna be like 3 feet high, you know what I mean? It'll be, that might actually work for this.
well, I can, at the very least, push him to buy as much as he can in this current budget year. Let me ask him both of these questions.
All right, while you're asking that, Vicky, the A230 DPW reserve line is gonna be 45,000. We've redone the capital replacement, or Ben has redone the capital replacement sheet.
What was that number?
45,000, we're gonna keep it at that for the next many years.
823?
I have it as A230.
On a spreadsheet,
Oh,
it's
okay.
212.
Okay, I have all this.
Right.
Actually, no, I had it.
Okay, and what is it you want that at now?
45,000.
Okay.
The police vehicle reserve, let's make that. Vicky, let's make that 18,000.
Okay.
That's gonna take it right tight to it,
Okay.
and then make a note somewhere that someone. Well, I don't in mind, that should be 20 next year. Or 25.
Yep. In regards to the sidewalk, we also have a reserve, or that money left over from the safe routes to school, but I don't know if you can use that in the state. If there's about 30,000 and change,
Thought we were using it for loan repayment.
no, it
No.
doesn't have to be used for loan repayment.
Oh, it didn't, right? It doesn't have.
Right, this is in this is in an actual check, it's not in a reserve, I'm sorry. It's in a checking account which was left over from the state routes to school.
We could use that for debt service,
We can use it for anything,
but not necessarily Union Street.
no, as long as it's through the sidewalk.
We don't have any sidewalk debt service right now.
So,
Well, let's do that then. Okay, let's take 15 from that, and spread it out over 2 years. Let's take 15 from that, put 15 in the sidewalk capital line. But add a revenue line for that appropriated sidewalk account, Vicky.
oh, sorry, okay, I thought you were talking, go
I'm
ahead,
gonna add a revenue line for that appropriate 15 from that sidewalk
okay,
checking account,
okay,
so that we can put 15 in next year's sidewalk line. So
okay,
now technically we'll have 35 available. We shouldn't take 35 to do that.
No, I wouldn't imagine. So the 20 that's in there. How does that work mechanically? Like, is that,
There's 30 in there, she said. Oh,
oh, sorry, the 25 plus, the 20 plus 15, so there's like 35.
35.
so it's 20 in this year, in this budget year.
So try and use as much as you can before.
Try to use as much as we can, and we'll allocate 15
Between the
in
two.
the next 2 years for sure.
Got it.
But it's not gonna be coming from tax dollars, it'll be coming from this leftover money.
I got it. That makes sense.
so the sidewalk contractual, you want it to go from 10 to 15?
Correct. You're gonna add a line.
There's already one there, because we've done it in the past. But we haven't ever had to use that appropriation, because we had more revenue than we did expenses, so
I
we.
don't really see the revenue line.
It is, it's right at the bottom where it's A 5031, it's line 48.
A 5031, that's interfund transfer, that's what we use for EMS bill.
It's still, is still an interfund transfer, we still have to use the same, budget number. I just separated them out so we knew what was for, sidewalks and what was for the actual EMS bill.
Yeah, I have that listed quite.
Yes. It's more so you guys can see what the actual EMS billing and what we've appropriated from the reserve.
Oh, gotcha. So you say there's 30 something there?
Yes, I can tell you exactly.
No, as long as it's. Price will be 15. Okay, that's nice.
Yes, 30,859.
Okay. Finished. Um. Waiting to find out about plans. Okay, which brings us to, let's skip to the bottom. We did the police vehicle reserve. EMS equipment, we made 10. Okay, which brings us back to our fun conversation of last time, which is, do we want to decide on an approach with respect to the requests from local organizations and not-for-profits?
So I did scan in the letters that were sent, including the financials of the library that they included. They're in the Dropbox, and the financials of the library, the very last page.
Under tonight's date?
Yes.
And I did go back and actually found in my 2006 folder, the request from the Ulysses Philomatic Library. And it actually did have their financial attachment, which was more detailed than what they had submitted here. But the only question I have is out of their entire budget that they've listed of 300 and what was it?
374,000 change.
Only 17,000 of that is for programs. Over 235,000, 53,000 is for salaries.
It's a lot like our budget.
Yeah, which I question. Well, I mean, you know, I don't want to ever undervalue someone's position for sure, but I was shocked by that number for library. I just, you know, I don't, like I mentioned to Ben last week, I don't want to take anything away from anyone. I just think there needs to be a process. And I agree with Warden that maybe we should have a cap. And that people should open their financials to show need for the, for what they're requesting.
Thoughts, anyone? Process versus keep doing what we've been doing in terms of,
I mean, my thinking is that it's, if anyone has, like, the process exists, and I think we have just gotten away from reviewing these requests, if anything, right? I don't think it's a question of anyone but us sort of dropping the ball on this, and, you know, I haven't looked at one of these reports in years. I've, you know, we, as the youth commission received similar requests, and we spent a meeting going through them each individually. I think for us, because there's a small, such a small percentage of our budget, we haven't done that, and we've been happy to just sort of let inertia carry through. And frankly, I'm actually fine with that. But I think if we wanted to look more closely, and, you know, like I said last time, I think all of the representatives from these organizations would be happy to come in and have the time to discuss it. I'm sure that for them would be an opportunity more than anything else. So if you wanted to go that route, I'd be happy with that.
I do think we have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers to review it, you know, to.
Yeah, I'm not sure the process is broken. I know we talked last time about capping our support. I'd much rather review requests individually and have people ask for what they think they actually need, the document that need, whether it's $1,000 or $25,000, to really figure out how much the bill really can help and what role we can play. In terms of the library, my attention was drawn to how people are using the library. Over 33,000 times their Wi-Fi was utilized, and their computer usage and their downloads. Having served on the Tompkins County Library Board, you certainly have an understanding of the trend in terms of what services libraries are really playing in the 21st century. And I think it's a huge importance that there is somewhere in the community that services these digital needs.
Oh, I totally agree.
Wi-Fi or reliable computers, which makes me probably not a discussion for this night, but it makes me think of what the future of a local library is, coupled with our clear need for the community center here in the village. And what does that kind of a partnership maybe look like down the road? Now that is funding. I would really get serious about, because we've talked about it. Everyone recognizes that it's needed. And I know the library has been very clear that they also don't want to be an after school babysitter, a daycare center, but I don't know how much longer they're gonna. It says 51,707 items were borrowed, because that can be more than books. So it's not just books. I'm curious what gets borrowed. But anyway, that's kind of an aside. Just like, I'm happy, my brain just goes looking at this financial report, my brain goes to, I might be really interested in providing a lot of support to the library. If there was an opportunity to kind of service that broader community need. If the future is to get away from books, there's always going to be, it's a little bit of people get books, but if you can download books, and you can rent out Kindles and download books, all of a sudden you don't need a lot of space for bookshelf, right? So what does that look like? Anyway, I guess that's just an example of I'm okay having people ask for different amounts of money and not capping it, because there might be a really great idea that requires one-time money that I'd be happy to give, even if it's really high. And I wouldn't want to hold people back from only being able to ask us for $1,000.
One thing that also just occurs to me is we used to have department heads come in, right? I mean, that wasn't that long ago. And it's sort of our first meeting was like a go through, a walk through with the department heads. I'm realizing, just thinking this through, that the youth commission has never come because obviously of Keith and I report, but we could have a program manager come in and do like that kind of a meeting, a sort of informational, like programmatic overview is a thing that we used to do that we could, you know, I'd be happy to include folks like this that are asking for money for nonprofits or what have you. In something like that, I think that kind of that design, that first meeting, that sort of, here's the programmatic priorities, here's what people are asking for, and then sort of we get down to brass tacks. You know, in our budget meetings that everyone knows so much.
I mean, I certainly do,
Terms.
I'm sorry.
No,
I certainly do understand the principle of supporting these individual not-for-profits. But really, our full responsibility is to the taxpayers and going over all of these really expensive things that are actually needs, not wants. So I think we just need to be careful that we don't, you know, there's muddy waters there depending on what you get into. Like Gordon said, we can't raise money. They can raise money. People can contribute towards things they think that are valuable and necessary, and they don't always have a lot of say in how their tax money is spent here, because a lot of it is set in stone as to what needs to be done in order to provide these services. So I think sometimes the waters could get a little muddied between our support of not-for-profits that are definitely benefit our community, but also to, you know, be responsible with taxpayer money and put it to where its use is best and necessary.
I think if we survey the taxpayer, we would find that need is very subjective.
Exactly, yeah. Mhm.
Whether it's a funding for the library or replacing a police vehicle, for example, do we need that? I think that's maybe not as cut and dry always.
Right.
that particular debate is one I would love.
I love to.
That's why I set that up nicely.
Yeah.
But, no, that's an example, and that's an example of like, you know, our police chief says we need this, not everyone thinks that's a need, thinks it's more of a luxury item, so it's, you know, I think there's. I would be just, want to treat all of these lines kind of independently, certainly some are more urgent than others, I would say, we agree with that, but.
So I think without having some sort of broader discussion on how do we think about these things, which maybe is the way we should go, I also hesitate to go that deep into this for $7,000. But maybe that's just maybe a little flippant, but out of a $3 million budget, we've spent a lot more time on this than maybe is warranted. And I hesitate to do what the town does, which is have people submit and have a whole rigmarole and everything. I do think it's important that some fraction of our budget go towards these kind of nice to haves. I think that's actually really important what we do. I don't think it can't be, it's got to be in proportion, but I think we need some amount. I don't unfortunately have a strong opinion, though I don't find these numbers that we're listing right now offensive in any way. Maybe it's just that this is the conversation. We have the information in front of us. We have this here. We have these asks. You know, if we would like to make this a part where we have more of like a, let's do a vote for each line instead of just kind of going through things that are a little less controversial, maybe we just take that approach. Trying to kind of think of what we can do in here or the next, month worth of time that we have today. And then maybe we also have a conversation for what does it look like for next year? And how do we think about that? But I'm not off put by these numbers, even though, if you'd asked me 4 years ago, I would have been for exactly, I think, the same reasons you're saying. But I think in the broader scheme of a $3 million budget, I actually prefer being able to support these institutions at the level that we do.
Hearing you say that makes me maybe better articulate what I'm feeling, and that's, yeah, it's only $7,000. So I kind of, to your point, but I find myself wondering why we're still talking about this, but at the same time, I think where I'm coming down now is it's because of the dollar amount, it's very easy to kind of rubber stamp it every year. And maybe there's a missed opportunity to, I think all of these organizations that ask us for money are all serving a great purpose. Clearly, they summarize what they do every year, and so it's not insignificant by any stretch. But I wonder if there is a missed opportunity because it's kind of formality to maybe push them to think more about what they could do. Like, yes, Historical Society, you're only asking us for $500 or $1,000. Have you really thought of what you could really be offering the community for $5,000? Because I'd be happy to have that conversation. It's just, if it becomes routine, I've been on enough nonprofit boards where it's easy to go through the motions every year. And especially if you have the same volunteers and you're not bringing in new volunteers to reimagine what you're doing. A lot of these places have exceptional potential to really jump out and be active in our community. And I wonder if just giving the same funding every year, not having more of a conversation around it. If it's like, well, we decided to not give you that $500 this year because we don't really think you reimagined your programming enough, and you're not as visible in the community as we think you could be. It's only $500, but if that's what it takes to make you kind of think about what more you could be doing, whether you're the Historical Society, the library, or Truman's Rec Community Rec, then that might be worth taking that funding away for 8 years to say, hey, come back next year with something that, something new, or something like that. So I think that's just where I kind of come down to why I'm interested in this topic is I see these as, great pillars of the community with the potential to really have a lot of impact. And part of me just wants to say, hey, I want you to think bigger than $500. Well, I'm not saying I'm going to give you $10,000, but I mean, think, what could you really do? You have real estate in the village, you have a building, we're in dire need of these things, and you have them, and what else could you be doing? So
That's interesting. So, all of this obviously predates all of us. This kind of request for funding, handout time, and budget time. What if we, and of course, we're not binding anyone in the future, but what if we change the way we think about it? And maybe it'll catch on and people will keep it going. So a $3 million budget, 1% of that is $30,000. What if next budget year, not this one, we're up against the clock. What if we determined going into next budget cycle, we were going to allocate some percent, right? 1%, 1/2 of 1%, and send a letter to all of these organizations and said, here's what we're allocating for community resources. And it's open-ended up to this number. So submit your proposal and what you want this dollar for. And we might award all of it to one organization.
Mhm.
Or we might split it up in some fashion. To make it more of a conceptually more of a grant style process where we're trying to get the taxpayers' money's worth.
And it puts more onus on the organization to say, this is what we could do. Now maybe we can think of something bigger, maybe, like your suggestion. And I know it does seem picky-oon, but and I know government budgets don't work like household budgets. I do understand that. But to me, and where I come from, $5,000 is a lot of money. So to not understand that $5,000 might be able to go towards a sidewalk or towards a crossing guard or toward something else that's super needed. When maybe an organization doesn't so much need it. Because they are in a position to fundraise or do other things for the money. I think that's just my sensitive part, is that I just come from a place where there wasn't always a lot of money, and that seems like a lot of money to me,
Yeah, I mean,
that it could go somewhere
I
else.
think the dollar amount is hard to focus on, because $5,000 is a lot of money. That's not a lot of money to a municipality. What I do think is significant to think about is the fundraising piece. These are organizations that they really, and I'm not saying that they don't, but if they really wanted to push the fundraising envelope, they could probably bring in a lot of money. And no one is naming the village of Trumansburg as a beneficiary of their life insurance policy. These organizations have received significant bequests over time. And so that does kind of lend itself to the get out of the rubber stamping approach of, if you make the cut. I remember I forget how Meals on Wheels even got on here a bunch of years ago, but
Well, it actually gives, of all of these, they give specific direct services to village.
exactly, but I
I
forget the circumstances under which they came on, because they weren't always on there. It was within the last 10 years.
It was before me, so it must have been 10 years.
But the notion that, okay, if you make a cut, then you're just a line item forever. And that's okay, as long as there's at least a review every year, which partly my fault we've gotten away from. But then I actually like the angle of, not only are you gonna sing for your supper, but we're gonna maybe allocate some more money than we historically have, but be more targeted with.
So I like this quite a bit. This is not too dissimilar from what I understand the town does. So if we have any interest in seeing how that's worked for them, it might be a resource. What I like about it is if we kind of step away from the details for a second and say, what is the percentage we're looking at? Or is it 1%, is it 0.5%? Right now, we're talking about 0.25%, which seems honestly low. When I think about it, right? I would go for 0.5 to 1%. When you're talking about what this is the cherry on top of the budget, right? We have all these kind of fixed costs in many ways. Yes, we can argue about if there's a police car or not, and that's meaningful, right? Not to dismiss that, but these are the special things that make Trumansburg really what it is, and I think it's worth considering 1% of the budget to go, 1% of the budget to go towards it. So I quite like that, because that gets us away from the details. It gets us to, okay, we have this bucket of money. It feels in line with the general budgeting principles that we're trying to come around towards. Then let's think about how do we actually allocate that and make that a little more of a structured conversation. And I think I would be up for that sort of approach.
Yeah, I like that this small conversation has turned into this, because I think it's a really worthy thing to discuss. And like you said, if the town has a formula that they use, or we've just kind of gotten away from the whole thing, and I agree with Gordon, I like the idea of kind of putting some onus on the organizations to think more about how things could be better, maybe.
I think what I also like about the kind of pool of money approach is there's a less of a, are you worthy in the abstract, and more of the opportunities in front of us, which seem most valuable. I think that's a better framing in general when we talk about this. I don't like the framing of, are you worthy enough to earn this, are you poor enough for that, is your budget so out of whack? It's what, but bringing it back to what does this money actually do? What are we proposing to do with this money? I think gets us in a much better.
It also cuts out the, why is so-and-so getting this much and why is so-and-so getting that much? It also takes away that too.
Right.
Well, and it kind of communicates priority too, right? Maybe an organization has a one-time chance to get a matching grant if they get 15,000 from somewhere else, right? Or something like that. So kind of puts some weight behind, we need money this year to double down or really to make a bigger impact. We get money this year, so.
And it can open up the rules of more than just the same four folks that have realized that this is a thing that they can ask for. I imagine there's other groups in the community that aren't aware that this is an option, and maybe we get some interesting people looking at one thing or another that we can consider.
I'd just like to quickly note, not to belabor this,
Yeah.
but I started out a staunch defender of the funding priorities that we currently have. And I've now watched us talk ourselves into spending more money. And I'm somewhat deterred by that trend in the way this conversation cycled. I just want to point that out. I'm happy with whatever, like, to me, it's important that we fund cultural activities and that we sort of use the leverage that we have in the most effective way possible, because I think, like, we are local decision makers, and I would say that we are beholden to our voters, not to our taxpayers. And I think that's important, particularly for cultural organizations like this, that like, these are people, they're not dollars, we serve people. But in any case, we're talking ourselves up.
Let's wage that partially. We can also include other things beyond just this particular element, right? Like, I could see the $5,000 we give to the farmer's market as part of that. I would want back away from
Well,
that.
then that's why I mentioned you, well, I think this approach could work.
And so, yeah, we can have a conversation of which things fall in this bucket and then how big is that bucket reasonably need to be to like kind of feel like we have the right amount of wiggle room in there. But it could be an interesting kind of conversation with bigger.
But I never looked at it from I never looked at it from being caught up by how much was being asked for. I'm looking at it from what could be the greatest ROI of our support for the community. And if expanding that, triples the ROI, then people are commuting for these exact services, so that's okay by me, obviously with a limit. But
Okay. Marsh, would you be willing to start on the drafting the rough outline of a letter that will accompany the contracts that I have to sign
Mhm.
after the budget is passed back to these organizations? Something to the effect of, do we have a form letter that we normally send you? So we'll start with the form letter that Vicky has. And here's we've agreed to it, so I can
Right,
see.
we've adopted the budget.
And then add in something to the effect of, beginning with next year's budget cycle. The village will be moving towards it's the opposite of the system.
opposite of what?
The opposite of the
New.
system.
A new system,
Yeah.
What's that?
just a new
New
system.
system, a new system.
Whatever.
A new system of allocating funds for organizations and programs to benefit village residents or something.
Okay.
Put them on notice,
I'll send it over.
which means we'll have to remember to do that next year.
You know, it's funny, I mentioned that if you're gonna do that, that would be the time to do it.
I'd like to say, I think 3 things on this, if I may. One is, there's plenty of granting organizations in Carver that you know them who only give out small ones, and you can only have a certain size of operating budget, so that large, well-funded organizations can't get something where 1,500 could be someone's entire summer program. Right, and that also you have an opportunity as a board to consider if in a budget year you want to drive a certain mission. Maybe you are going to target like a granting fund, but we want to really promote programs doing XYZ. And then can you be specific as a board about what materials you will want for submission? Like what you want to see, like, do you want to see their full financial audit?
I think we'll have to
See their
do an
annual
application.
report, because from an office standpoint, like, though I'm already asking an in-depth question, being asked questions from the librarian. Who really wants to make sure you all see what you want to see on March 13th beyond what she's already submitted and what all of her records show has ever been submitted. So my last comment is a question, which is, do you still want the head librarian from the Ulysses Philomathic to come on March 13th to speak to the board? And will you be asking any of these other fund requesters to do the same?
I don't think we should do that this year.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna switch the way we do it, I don't
I
think we
think
should
we should.
single anyone out, and I don't think we have the time or the patience to do this with everyone in ad hoc,
I agree.
just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah, I don't think we've come to a place where the $7,000 we're all fine with this year, so.
Yeah. Let's go with that and start anew.
So I'll just send her a very cordial thanks so much for your availability and
We're gonna
this
start
working a really good discussion.
Yeah.
Tell Laura she's up.
Sorry?
Tell Laura she's up.
Another conversation we don't want to have is you could actually name this fund after somebody in the community. This community resource fund could be named after them.
Well, so I think where it gets fun is you have different pieces within it. And there's a whole conversation here, there's different pieces of the fund.
We're not actually creating a fund though, so we don't get.
Right, but it could have a, yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Gordon, can you tell me what your bottom line on expenses are?
No, I can't. Not yet. Did you talk to Joel about other EMS revenue?
Yes, he is on board with 135 as the interest fund, the billing number.
Billing number.
And then he has a number of things that are kind of,
We were talking 1,000, 10,000, 15, I mean,
it's such a gamble right now. The big one is that we're not billing evidently for like 60% of our billable calls, but he's not quite sure why. There's a number of other things that are going in the RSI piece. We don't know exactly how or when we can bill or how much.
we couldn't try to budget something yet. Keep it.
I think, yeah, I think we've got to wait, fortunately, but the 135, you know, looking back, usually we're around 90.
Right.
And he was confident enough that we'd get something at that 135, sort of captures the hope for improvements.
Okay. And then Vicky, I'll need the interest earnings on the reserve accounts for February.
Okay.
Sometime the week of the 6th, once you're back.
Okay.
Do we have like a preliminary number we could plug in there?
Interest on reserve accounts, I put in 20,000. Based on January, that 20,000 is low, so that's why I want to see February.
Oh, and interest and earnings was just a couple hundred, right? That's
Interest paid and earnings I've zeroed out just because that's the checking account as earning. Okay. I do have one other item out of this budget that will require an executive session, so let's, for the moment, move on to water. Should be pretty straightforward. Metered sales, Vicky, we should keep the same as we grow into our new rates. Unmetered sales and interest and penalties will keep the same as last year. And then just zero out the rest of those for now on the revenue side.
The meter sales, except for the county.
And let's see, what do you have blank on the water?
Legal.
I don't know that we need, well, we don't need any of guys time for water. Do we?
I think of.
Let's zero that out. Engineer contractual, we can keep that the same at 5,000. You don't have anything else blank, do you?
Disability insurance, but I'm just kind of filled it in, that should be about the same. Okay. Just the reserve accounts.
May I ask a question about contractual? If it was budgeted 5 and then 15 was used in 5 and 37 was used, we're still comfortable with
What
5.
line are you talking about?
The add 144.0.4 engineer contractual.
Yeah, well, it's not gonna be 37, because that 15 was for MRV's work on where's the water budget?
So they did a water, was that the water capital project
Yes.
study?
Yes,
So our anticipated line is higher probably than. I would do that high.
that line is gonna be 5 for this upcoming budget year. We paid 15 to have a study done. It's not gonna be 37. 'Cause they're not.
That's my question.
They're not doing it for water.
Okay.
Um, all of their work now is going over the stormwater. Basically. In grant writing. Uh, Do you have a projection of what the water rates will do to total revenue? Including the increase in September?
I mean, I haven't finalized what the rates would be, but, let me see if I have that.
Because we had talked about targeting like 700.
Right, I mean, I think I was trying to target what you go, I think I might have that.
And I don't need that now, actually. So
I was targeting that 726 and change. Total revenues annual. I can give you a more specific number.
So until we're actually hitting that number, we're still guessing. On the revenue side,
Yeah, I'd imagine come a little under that for that. Unless we want to look at targeting a rate increase in July, then we're a little closer.
let's keep it. September would be a year from this. A rate increase.
Yeah.
And there's how much is in the water rate stabilization reserve?
Like 5,000.
Is there anything left in debt reserve?
Yep, 131. But we have 20, but we have 20,000 and change allocated for this year, right? Yes. 20,009, so 21,000 out of the 131 is allocated for this year.
So what I'd actually like to do is I would like to accelerate the use of the debt reserve for debt service. Okay. And appropriate all of the water rate stabilization reserve. So as to move it into the other reserves. So in other words, we'll be spending out of rate stabilization. And we'll be keeping the capital and equipment reserve lines funded. While we ease into finding out what the actual revenue is gonna end up being as we raise rates. Conceptually, does that make sense? It's a little bit of left pocket, right pocket, but.
Right, what's the, why?
So we are, for the last several years, short on revenue from what we budgeted. Significantly, yeah. And so Ben is working on getting our rates up to where we will actually be able to have. Right,
That part,
extra money going in, but we're not there. And I don't actually know how long it's gonna take. And. Water owes. Some
General.
money to general. Good.
well, why the out of one reserve and then the other?
So the water rate stabilization reserve was set up years and years ago to try to keep rates quiet. Right. That has not worked, and we're now basically in arrears to ourselves in water. So I'd like to appropriate that out, kill the water rate stabilization reserve. Which will allow us to then essentially move that money to the other reserve lines, which otherwise we would need to zero out this year and not contribute to those reserve accounts. Until we know what the actual revenue is gonna be once the rates are where they need to be. And I don't like conceptually or on principle, I don't like not contributing to reserves, because that's what got us to where we are with all the borrowing.
Yeah.
That's right.
Remind me again, Vicky, what's in the water debt reserve?
100, there's 131,000 in it. We've appropriated 21,000 in 20,
As of right now, the balance is 131.
right? So you're talking 110,000. For 23, 24.
Because we're,
Because we
So
already
you
did
took out
that.
the 21 in the current budget year,
Yes.
so 110.
Okay, Ken. We have appropriated it through the budget. That doesn't mean by May 31st, we would have to use it if we can collect enough money.
No, move it.
Okay, yep, fine, okay. So you want to appropriate the 110?
No, I want to appropriate, let's appropriate half of it.
55?
Yeah.
And then you want to appropriate 74,000 of the water stabilization?
Correct.
Yes. There's still these small balances in there, in it, you know,
So you should have 74,650, 746,500 on the revenue.
correct.
And so then what's in the water equipment reserve? Balance,
I believe it's negative by about $300 because that's where the.
after May.
After that.
We read
40 minus that, so just,
Yeah, so 39 and change, 39,000 and change.
and what's in the water capital improvement?
It's 351 down, 352,000.
the schedule I have written up had 15 in reserves going in for equipment.
Say again.
I had 15 going in for equipment reserves.
In 22, 23?
No, for 23-24, based on my schedule that I'm working on.
Oh, okay, I don't know anything,
That, no, you wouldn't know. I'm just,
the only thing Dusty gave me was the 20,000. He said possible new truck, but that was in 24, 25. And
so I have that,
we're not gonna do the backhoe this year. Because Dusty had said, because
yeah,
we didn't use it a lot.
I've got the backhoe coming in, not this coming budget year, but the next.
Okay,
And I actually have that truck in this coming budget year, but with the 40 that goes in. And we're selling the old one, we should be good to make that work with 15 and.
So let's make the water equipment reserve 50,000. 50.
okay,
And then the water capital improvement reserve, make that 67,396,
can you say that one more time?
67,396.
Okay,
That'll balance the water budget, and then depending on where revenue actually falls. If we're short. that water capital improvement reserve is where we will make up. We'll short our contribution to that.
Okay, I'm over by $224, $274. So maybe I didn't hear the water capital improvement.
67396.
That's what I have, and that it's putting, so could we subtract $274 from that?
Sure. No, I'm wondering what it is. Give me a second.
Okay, now. And nothing in the other two reserves, correct?
Correct. Well, the other two reserves are stabilization, which we just emptied, and
Right, right, I just wanted to make that, okay.
Everybody okay with the math voodoo?
But there's more in the equipment reserve than I think we needed for what we're looking at, but I don't feel mind if we're looking to kind of add that and then more consider later on.
Yeah, I'd like to, yes, and I don't know what when we get to this time next year, we'll know what our actual water revenue looks like.
It's fine.
Because if it's as high as we want it to be, then it's gonna drop down the following year, because we don't have the appropriation for the reserves. Right. So if we essentially will be getting leaner in our reserve contributions next cycle. Yeah. And we can pad them in this cycle. If we're short, then it doesn't matter. Yeah, we're not allocating as much. Particularly when we factor in the due to general.
Right, that's the interesting part.
Can you read through the revenue on that one? I missed something. My revenue line is coming out.
We got 610 under metered sales, staying with last year's, since we still haven't actually hit that number. 2 for unmetered, 5,500 interest and penalties. Everything is zeroed out, and then I have 2 appropriation lines. One is rate stabilization for 74,000. The other is debt reserve for 55,000.
Oh, okay, so we're just supposed to be higher. Right, because for expenses, I'm at 736. Or am I missing something?
746,500 is what I have.
Sorry. Well, I'm not overly concerned about it. That's less than what I thought I missed. I'll catch up with these when she says you can grab that.
Can we go to the interest, it's the 2402 line?
Interest earned on reserves.
Yes, so we're getting about we're gonna zero it out, so it's gonna be, let's say, $800 a month now, once you get rid of those 2 other lines. Isn't that 800 times 12 is 50,000 and change? 9,000, 9,600?
Yeah, let's make it 7,500
Okay,
then. And then just balance the budget in that water capital improvement reserve line. Because that's the one where we will
Yep.
flex based on actual revenue and after general is paid back.
okay. Got it.
Anything else on water? Okay. Sewer should be pretty straightforward. Let's start with the expense side first. The guy for sewer at all is here? Shouldn't.
Sewer law is pretty tidied up. I don't know, but you know, top other than that.
Engineering,
Do you want the $1,000? Do you want to do it as zero or leave it?
0.
Okay.
I don't have any big engineering MRB stuff coming.
Thinks the only other stuff is, but I think we're gonna go for grant stuff is, kind of that larger sewer maintenance improvement approach. But I think that would probably fall under grant work.
There's the ongoing I&I stuff.
Yeah. I kind of thought it fall under those too.
Well, let's stick 5,000 in there for the engineer, just in case.
Hmm?
100 for them.
5,000.
Mm, Sewage treatment and disposal equipment. What do I have in my notes? Let's see, that was 1,500 last year. Let's keep that at 1,500 unless there's something we know. is more.
No, I don't, no.
Mm,
I'm gonna put 350 in the disability line, which is basically what it was last year.
The 2233 is correct for FICA.
Mhm.
Okay. So. What do you have for your expense line now?
434,067.
There's a reserve down. So again, we have a rate stabilization reserve. And we are working on new sewer rates with municipal solutions.
Yeah, I haven't heard any update on that. Yeah. So my suspicion, I mean, they'll have some sense, but I think we'll have our own opinion on what number we're trying to target. I think they'll help us with getting an idea there, but
And for all of the same reasons as water, I'd like to appropriate all of the rate stabilization reserve.
65,000. Hold on. Yes. Okay.
Which means. So where are we gonna need to go first? Regular sewer reserve is for the plant. Collection system repair reserve is infrastructure.
Mhm.
Where do you see us?
I feel like infrastructure is where we're stopping the plant at this point.
You would really hope so. So let's appropriate. Or let's budget. 40,000 to the collection system repair reserve. And balance the budget in the sewer reserve line.
Okay.
And that'll be where we adjust if we have a
Okay.
underage.
I see the facilities contract is up April 1st. We throw bids out for that, I'm assuming.
It was up April 1st, 2020.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Till when?
It's just ongoing until we do something different.
Okay, so we don't have a contractual agreement when it runs out at a certain time. They just get unlimited contract is going.
We have not put the sewer plant out to bid since we went with a current provider.
Which wasn't Deb Watkins on the board then?
6 years ago.
Don't you think it's time we did that?
There just aren't many of them.
Well, then it should be a short process then, but we should probably put it out to bid, wouldn't you think?
Dusty has indicated a desire to stay with the current operator. Just between the communications that we've had with them, and his needs and wants and their responsiveness. We could. We can certainly always put something out to bid anytime we want for any reason. But Dusty has indicated, because I asked him specifically about it, and he said he's not inclined to want to change. Because of his satisfaction level. But that doesn't mean we can't. You know, run that by him again.
I run by it again. I also checked in with him, I think, for when it was up most recent, we got the same kind of sense from him. He was very happy with their level of service.
He's exceptionally happy with them, actually, which is
Okay,
unusual.
it's just a question.
But we can certainly take a look from a dollars and cents standpoint. Sirens.
There's been a lot of them today. So they're 4 or 5.
Very slippery out.
Yes.
Yeah, just had a chat with Dusty, he's still here.
There's another.
Yeah, I saw.
I mean, I could have stayed here.
That's not-
It was what?
Did we get the questions? Did you have?
Yeah, I'm happy to circle back to that.
Yep.
But I think that's just that.
Anything else on sewer?
Yeah, all the revenue.
425 for rents. 2 for interest and penalties.
Yeah.
0 for interest and earnings. The
What-
reserves, do you have a number for reserve or interest?
If you're gonna zero that out, I would say 700 a month.
From the reserve?
The interest on reserve, yes.
Let's make that 5,000 then.
Numbers, that's what, okay, so
And then the rate stabilization reserve appropriation.
you have. So we're gonna put 22,933 in the sewer reserve.
Yes. You have a rounding error somewhere because I'm off by $1. I only use whole numbers. Some of your calculations use pennies, just FYI.
Some of the ones that I've done by formulas probably do.
Create pennies or cents.
I have
Add up.
497 even.
Yeah, it's 497 even, but a couple of your lines, just I noticed. are
Oh, okay.
off year-over-year.
That's what it is, because they think it. Like, trust me.
Anything else on sewer? Everybody good with sewer? Okay, back to general then. What's the word on snowplows?
So talking to Dusty, the line is actually for a snowplow and a salt spreader. The 2 snowplows, he's gonna buy one in this current budget year. The reason for buying the snowplow now is that it makes a significant reduction in overtime handling snow, because they can get through much quicker. It's a wider plow. You know, he said he could look at trying to find, take another look at current balances, and if there's enough to maybe get both of them in this current budget year. We would really hesitate to push it out another year, though it's possible. I would suggest we leave it as is, but I can get back with him, get back to here, the next week or so with, if he's able to pull it into this budget year in any way.
No need, so we'll just leave that line at 16.
Yeah,
Just FYI, after I find or after Vicky gets me the February interest on reserve accounts, I may adjust that revenue line currently at 20,000, I might bump that up a little bit. Otherwise, I don't foresee a need to make any other changes.
I'll just say that the effort he went through to do better with our reserves is paying off now, so thank you for that.
What was revenue line are you talking about?
Interest on reserve accounts, you may change that after you give me February, so I wish I had control over interest rates, that would be,
Well, you put it in a place to account.
that would be interesting. Anything else on general?
So I have two notes that I just want to make quickly. One, I was remote last time, so it's hard to like interact, but I wanted to point out what you talked briefly about trustee salaries. I mean, I think this is something that we skim over. It's just a weird place to be like, we should raise our own salary. I think we should all consider as our last move in office, so that we can avoid that awkwardness, that we raise salaries. I think if we think objectively about this board and the makeup of our median income on this board, to me, is much higher than it should be, much higher than the village as a whole. And that indicates to me that there's a gap there, right? Like, I think you can point sort of, I don't know why we're all here personally, right? I think it's sort of
What do you think?
some weird martyrdom syndrome thing, but like our selection process for trustees is weird. So I think that's something that I think it's worth pointing that out, and I think it's something we should think about. Roden had initially declined his own salary when he became mayor, and I felt very strongly at that point that doing that disincentivizes a future mayor at some point, right? We want to incentivize, like, we want competition for our jobs, as weird a thing as that is. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind. I'm not saying we should do that this year, but I do want to sort of just put that bug in people's ears as something to think about. That, like,
That's on you too next year.
Yeah, I was gonna say half the board is up next year, so
Right.
it's not as far off as maybe it's.
I mean, I think I don't know, who knows if that would really impact anything, in all honesty. But I think it's worth thinking about.
Well, I thought it was important, I don't know what you were here, just so that it was meaningful importance to you joining the board. I think that speaks to like that it is really, it can make the difference between somebody who's willing to take on the role and not. And I think that's important.
Well, for me personally, it definitely kept me on the board when I went back to school. Right, it was like that little piece of like, oh, damn it, all right, fine, I'll stay, like, it would, just put me over that edge. So it's definitely meaningful.
Right.
But it's, you have so many other things have to align, right? Like, you have to have the time, you have to have the commitment. Well, there's a lot of other things. But I think it's worth pointing that out, right? Like, as a group, our average income is far too high for this village. And I think we should think about ways to correct that.
Is that true? Do we know that for?
I do not know that for a fact. I am guessing.
I mean, looking at the home values, you might.
Say that in a different way. You're kind of correcting something.
So I think that as a group, as a board, our average income is higher.
Collectively.
Yeah, of the five of us is probably higher, and I'm guessing, to answer Keith's question. Totally don't know. But I believe that our average income would be higher than the median in the.
What is the median income?
The USA 2020 census set the median income of the village of Trumansburg at $59,700.
Single or married?
Does it matter? It's household.
Well,
It's a huge difference.
it's a huge difference. If you're the Hannons and you have 5 people living.
It's a
in
household, it's a household income regardless.
Median household income.
Yeah, so 2 people are earning.
And so you're saying that
Household.
you're saying that we need to find, if there was a way to attract individuals to the board.
So I'm saying that we as a group demographically do not represent the village very well. And one way that we might be able to correct that.
Income wise.
Income wise, but also you know, in other ways, right? I think age-wise, we're a pretty narrow band.
Well, age-wise, we have been,
And these are, I'm not trying to, you know,
Until recently,
until recently, we were probably the youngest municipal board in the state.
right,
I think we still are, but, so,
Certainly in Tompkins County,
right.
by a lot of years.
So area median income for a family of 4 in Tompkins County is 100,000 a year.
it's a lot of money, I don't,
Okay, no, I see what you're saying.
yeah,
So that's Tompkins County, that's not the village is lower.
yeah.
But you're generally speaking about kind of diversifying.
But I think in general, right, I think it's important when it's worth thinking about, right? Trying to align incentives so that we get the people that we want over the long term, right? Like not trying to get ourselves out of a job or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's,
But I think it's worth structuring those incentives so that we attract, again, long term, the representation that the village needs.
Well, I think it's an important thought, I think. If that's really what we believe, then I think there has to be a serious conversation about what that number has to be to actually be an incentive, which may not be.
Well, and that's where
taxpayers want us to
Yeah.
list the trust.
so there's two quick thoughts I had on that. One is, I've always felt, and I think income stratification is worth conceptually considering just as ethnicity and otherwise, but I've always felt that this board has been, over long periods of time, more effective than other municipal boards that I observe. Primarily because the diversification between people who are multi-generational and relatively new to the area, that there's been a nice balance there. And where we see boards which are entirely made up of quote unquote newcomers, or boards which are entirely made up of 9th-generation folks.
Right.
That's where things swing to, the pendulum swings too far to either direction. And I've always felt that that balance has been an important one here, particularly when we're talking about things like zoning.
Yeah, oh, I totally agree, and I think if you were to weight the relative importance for our jobs of those different factors, I would tend to agree that that's probably one of, if not the most important. Like I said, I'm not advocating for doing that this year, I just wanted to, I think it's a more important issue, and I think it's easy for us to look at it as like, I don't want to raise my own salary, but I think there are, you know, strategic objectives at play there.
I also think it's probably worth mentioning that I think the number one reason why people will never run for local office has nothing to do with it.
I agree.
I would say that we are
It has everything, it has
constantly,
everything to do with the cesspool of,
Facebook, yeah.
yeah.
right,
Social media,
right, and I mean, you know,
which
like,
I don't know how to.
Well, and
understand
time,
really.
right? I mean, I mean,
It's your.
I don't think it's your time. I think Roden's right, I think it's 100% the toxicity of local discourse,
Mhm.
100%. I like, as a very sensitive, empathetic person, it is very difficult for me to look at Facebook ever. Ever, 100%. Our discourse in this town is so toxic that I said town instead of village. That's how toxic, that's how
Well,
frustrating it is.
And.
I don't think
And,
it's just this town, by the way. I think it's
no, but I,
all communities.
and from what I hear, and I don't go on, but I hear that a lot of that toxicity comes from a very small, minute part of our village in general.
Sure.
Others are just, I'm assuming, voyeurs, and they look and they process information and say nothing, so.
They run.
I don't even look, but, so, yeah, and I agree, and who wants to be open to that type of thing? Gotta have a tough skin if people are gonna constantly take personal hits at people, I guess.
Or like me, because everyone, Keith and I were talking about this the other day, do not have a tough skin. I do not. You also said you do not, right? I think it's more that you're passionate enough about being here that you live through being continuously hurt,
Yeah,
right? Like that's all it is. You just care more about the good you're doing than the pain it causes. I don't think anything I've been told you must have a thick skin so many times in my life, I'm tired of hearing. So for the record,
I don't.
I
have
don't have a thick.
I think what I said was I consider myself on the thick skin.
That's right.
But then people think that that means things don't hurt you. either.
Right.
It's like, I can have a publicly thick skin, but it doesn't mean like, I don't, it doesn't mean I'm not gonna die at 55 as a heart attack. I internalize everything that I feel.
Sorry,
Just everything has an impact, but no, I mean, and also when I say time, I don't necessarily mean like you're busy in your day, so to speak. I mean, I think 4 out of the 5 of us don't really have to leave our house if we didn't want to, or the village for our day jobs.
It's not insignificant.
So that helps. And I mean, if you have a young family, like we all have young families, but with very understanding partners who support our government endeavors, like all that matters, I think, that's.
But if you're going to do your job, there's tons of time involved, really.
Sure,
I mean, yeah. I mean, you can do nothing. You can be on the board and just be there and not contribute. It's all possible. People have done it. But if you're really gonna do your job, it is time involved. It is a sacrifice of time.
Well, that's kind of why I think, I don't know if you heard me, Ben, but I think that's why I kind of brought it up originally, is kind of, there is constant discussion, right, about living wages and paying people for their time now, and what a trustee puts in on average and the mayor puts in is probably a lot more than, I mean, if you calculate the hourly rate for Rorden right now, the taxpayers should be throwing them a ticker tape parade every year.
And being the mayor or deputy mayor, or just being on a board of a small town village now is way different than it used to be 20, 30 years ago. You didn't have as much state oversight. You didn't have to answer to all these people that you need to. You didn't need to fight tooth and nail for funding for this. And, our like Gordon mentioned, our EMS thing, when is somebody gonna start listening? And it takes somebody that's willing to put in the time and beat the band and call the people that really count. And it's different than it used to be. It's just way more different than, well, that's the way we always done it. Did it that way 40 years ago. Don't see why we can't do it that way now.
Well, you don't have to look very far in any direction to see municipalities who operate that way. And you can talk themselves right out of once in a, never mind lifetime, once in a multi-century opportunity to do something, because.
Well, again, remind there, I don't think the county is listening tonight, but again, remind the story of why I had to leave TCOG is they refused to do virtual meetings. And now all they do is virtual meetings. They told me that it wasn't gonna happen. They would not offer it. And so I'm like, okay, well, I can't keep using vacation time for TCOG. Of course.
All it took was a global pandemic.
When did we jump to 5,000 for trustees? Do you remember when that? What did you do?
2000, I want to say 11, it was 10 or 11. It was post recession, it was 11. It was post recession, and Deb Watkins was taking on the entirety of the second water source project. And Marty suggested that we create a separate line item for deputy mayor and bump trustees. So it's been over a decade.
For whatever it's worth, just for inflation, that's pushing up against 7 now.
So I need to get you that spreadsheet.
And that was
salary spreadsheet.
Oh, salary spreadsheet.
that raise went from 2,000 to 5,000.
I feel like there was a 4 in there somewhere, or it went from 2 to 4 or 2 to 20. Oh, yeah.
Sounds like it was at least a doubling of the salary.
I mean, we could certainly just kind of have the conversation and earmark it for next year. We also talk about going to like 6 and 8 and 12 or something like that as a small step in that direction. I think it would make sense for all the reasons we're talking about. And we're gonna have potentially 2 positions opening up in the next year. I guess those would start with the next next budget, with not this, but the next budget, but even still, it kind of gives a sense of if someone starts asking about things in the next, 6 to 9 months, which they have to start thinking about.
I mean, I'm super happy to serve, but I'm also, like you say, disappointed that more people don't run, you know?
So the
And look at
12,
what they're missing,
the 12,
Wednesday
13,
night budget party.
the 12-13 budget, the total village board was 10,500. The mayor was 7,500,
What year was that?
the 12-13 budget. Because I thought it had changed in my tenure here, I'd have to go back and look at budgets, but
You said the budget, where are the budgets on the website? Is that where you're looking?
no, I
I
have,
feel
I
like
have,
it's
a
like
budget. I
it's-
have.
They only go back to 17 with this website. What did it bring?
I threw my head, I got trailer park in there too.
Yeah, I'm happy to have the conversations. I've never felt comfortable about voting for higher salaries and taxpayer dollars. It's a
Yeah.
very strange feeling for me.
It
And I
is
think that's
strange.
why it's important that we detach ourselves from it, right? Like it really is a
Yeah, I mean, for me,
priority question.
I think it would, the reason why I would think it might make most sense actually at this particular time is because we're looking at potentially 2 board seats opening up. People trying to get people interested in it. I don't know how much an extra $1,000 for a board seat per year really turns the dial any which way, but it does seem like a small gesture in that direction that could be interesting to consider.
Is there any kind of local, non-partisan organization that would be fit to put a survey together? I'd be curious of like, have you ever thought of running for office? Yes or no? If yes, like what's holding you back? Is it, are we talking about a problem that doesn't exist? Or is it money? Is it
There's at least one
fear of retribution?
There's at least one political party still active that would be perfectly suited to create a survey.
But it's not partisan, non-partisan. Would be a part of the survey.
Survey doesn't have to be partisan,
Right.
just because the organization is putting it together is.
So that's true.
Questions don't have to be partisan.
Yeah,
I don't know what your
the question has been
would be like.
pretty general, I would imagine.
The increase was in the 13-14 budget.
13, 14.
But I'm assuming it would not be appropriate. The village, that would have to come from.
What it's part of the other perfect, would be the perfect organization to put together right now. What prevents you from running for local office? It would be a short. Multiple choice. Statement. Add comments at the end if you want. Those would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, how would you? Yeah, we can talk. I'm not sure how you make sure that it's a specific constituency that
Well,
answers it, right? And that would be the only.
To the advantage, consistency is helpful. I mean, when somebody's working on something, we've been doing the water sewer, and if this ended up being his year, it would be hard for somebody to take over that with the amount of hours that he's put into zoning and water and sewer.
So that actually speaks to an entirely different conversation.
Yeah.
Which is village administration. At some point, how small is too small of a village, or how big does a village have to get? To where you start looking at village administrator, village manager, paid position. Who responds to an elected board who doesn't have to do much work. That's something we talked about a year or so ago, and let it lie there. City of Ithaca is going down that road. And we think, well, they're the city of Ithaca. But the year-round population is, only 10 times ours. So when you look at all of the things we're taking on. I don't have an opinion either way. I think if you have a good elected board with good administrative skills, then you don't need a village manager. I think if you get a lousy elected board who's there to argue about, pick your hot topic and not
accomplish anything.
accomplish, and not the water flows uphill, the other stuff flows downhill, and we get the fire trucks out the door. Then a village manager would be a great position, a great person to employ.
So I'll say, since this has come up, I'm 100% in favor of a village administrator. I think if we replace MRB's grant writing time with someone doing that, we would pay for it immediately. And then we wouldn't have to have this conversation about trustee salaries, right? We'd be here debating the philosophical value of finding a library until midnight, and that would be it's a long-term conversation. I don't think it is. Yeah, we're not gonna solve it.
But yeah, no, it's a conversation I've never considered having until 18 months ago, coming through the pandemic and administratively, there's a fair bit. And so what if a future board is not as engaged? What does that look like? But we can continue to discuss that. Is there anything else on either of the three budget tabs before we hopefully have an executive session?
Before we have an executive session, can you do the resolution in bond test in the bank?
Sure.
Thank you.
So that was a change to the agenda, which we forgot to add. Housekeeping with respect to signatories on the bank accounts. And so in the Dropbox, there is a simple resolution which states, this is for the bank, please take notice that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Trumansburg at a special board meeting held today, adopted a resolution authorizing Jessica Giles, Deputy Treasurer, to become a signer, that should say on, all the Village of Trumansburg's accounts effective March 1. And so I would entertain a motion to pass a resolution accordingly.
So,
Second. Any questions, comments?
do actually have a question. Our organizational meeting, we appoint, I'm forgetting what they're called. Keeper of records, collector of taxes, whatever the titles are. Do we need to do that in the interim?
So those are
Does clerk,
standard,
like automatically?
those are statutorily defined as roles of the clerk.
Okay, all right, good.
Any other questions? Comments?
Just to let you know, when I do this for you, Ben will get electronically signed documents to add, and just look at them, so. So,
Really, no.
Any other questions?
okay.
Okay, hearing none, and all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So can I mention one thing very quickly?
Yeah.
Jeff and I were talking earlier about just clarifying that, there would be money reserved within DPW for taking care of T-Bird. I think it's generally been $2,000 for plants and soil. I don't know if we specifically talked about that.
It's in there.
It's in there, okay. I think
Is that old spaghetti sauce commercial? It's in there. Is that Prego?
Yeah, it's Prego.
Yeah, no, that's. Okay. Yes. All right, then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter, specifically related to the employment of a particular individual.
So,
Second.
All in favor? And we're in executive session. David, have a good evening.
you are watching, boy, what, okay here. You never get to see that